Call the January 9th, 2018 work session of the Portsmouth City Council to order. Madam Clerk, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, sir. Mr. Clark?
Here.
Mrs. Lucasberg? Here. Mr. Moody?
Here.
Ms. Simmons?
Here.
Dr. Whitaker? Mayor Rowe?
Here.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we have our work session cut out for us, and we'll start off with the city manager and item number 1.
Okay. Mayor and members of City Council, during the November 13th Public Works session, Mrs. Alice Kelly, Chief Financial Officer, presented a refinancing opportunity for the city. And with the approval of City Council, our finance staff and financial advisors moved the process forward. The first presentation tonight, Mrs. Kelly will present to the City Council the successful results of the city's refinancing and the proposed use of the FY18 savings for general fund equipment and legal fees. The second presentation, Mr. Bob Baldwin, Planning Director, will present the modification to the public hearing process. This process will engage the applicant in making presentations to City Council. Also tonight, members of City Council, you will have before you for consideration 5 public hearing items, of which Mr. Baldwin will provide a short overview and highlight 2 telecommunication tower applications. Mrs. Kelly.
Happy New Year, Mayor Rowe, council members.
Sorry, I just need to make sure.
Thank you. All right. In November, City Council was briefed on the potential for a substantial refunding of our debt. Our city financial policy is to consider refunding that would yield a net present value savings of over 3%. Our market conditions at the time of the briefing was that the city could save over $12 million and have a net present value savings of 7.5%. We scheduled the sale for Monday, December 11th. However, the week of December 1st, the municipal bond market caught on fire, is the technical term our financial advisors used. Investors were scrambling to purchase bonds as the Tax Reform Act passage was looming, and then also a federal shutdown was looming. The city was in a good position as our CAFR and our audit was done, and the credit ratings had been received from our national credit ratings. The city sought to obtain a negotiated deal because there were so many deals out there, and that a negotiated deal would help us make sure we had more visibility and we'd be able to take advantage of the lower interest rates that week. Wells Fargo was able to read our completed CAFR and ask questions on a due diligence call that Tuesday. And man, they read every single word, it seemed, of that CAFR and made sure that they asked a lot of questions. But they were able to sell our bonds that Thursday on December 7th. That day also was the day the market started changing to slower the interest rates as a continuing resolution for the federal government was signed by the House and the Senate. And the market that was on fire was slowly slowing down, and interest rates started to creep back up. The city was able to achieve a cash flow savings of $15.7 million with a net present value savings of 10.1%, which is very well above the city's policy of a 3% net present value savings and the November estimate of 7.51 savings. If the city had waited till Monday, the savings would have been closer to $14 million, still a substantial amount, but we were able to just time it almost exactly right for the market, so it was a really good achievement for the city. In order to refinance the debt, the city received ratings from the 3 national credit rating agencies. All 3 reaffirmed our strong investment rating of AA2 or AA. While the rating agencies commented positively on the city's financial flexibility and our sound financial cushion, with our fund balance being high, they also made comments on our significant long-term liability burden and our pension obligations. I'm not quite sure if you could see this totally, but the refunding savings is split between tax-supported and public utility debt. The refunding savings is $9.18 million for the general obligation debt, and for utilities it's $6.5 million, and that is spread out over the course of the life of the bonds that we have. The annual debt service will vary year by year, and in FY 2018, there's 1.185 savings for the general obligation bonds. A budget transfer of $1.485 million is requested from the city's debt service budget for this fiscal year from the refunding savings as well as issuance cost savings to cover some one-time purchases that are crucially needed. We have biomedical equipment and gear equipment. The AED and CPR machines that we use are critical to save lives. These machines drastically increase the ability to save heart attack victims. Since many of the city's AED and CPR machines are aged, we are not meeting the current American Heart and Life Support standards, and the newer equipment will have better features. In addition, we wanted to add 6 AED and CPR equipments so all the fire vehicles, including administrative vehicles, will have this life-saving technology.
Are those for the EMS vehicles?
Yes.
Fire?
Uh-huh.
How about City Hall itself?
That's not part of this. Those are different pieces of equipment. But
Yeah,
the fire chief probably can answer that a little bit
It's
better than
not
I
that
can.
equipment.
Okay, I would suggest if we don't have those posted in City Hall, that we look into doing that.
Have what?
Right, and we will take that actually out of risk management.
We have them in City Hall.
Yeah.
On all the floors?
Are they on all floors? Do you know?
So, yes, ma'am.
I think they are, and they've been here.
Okay, one right set notice, well, that's good.
They're on the walls.
Okay.
And a slightly different type of equipment, right? If I'm understanding right. Okay. The city is also going to use $380,000 for much-needed second set of gear for firefighters and 50 lockers to store the gear. Research indicates that firefighters are exposed multiple times a day to some harmful carcinogenics, which stay on our firefighters' gear until it's washed. Currently, personnel do not always have the time to properly wash this gear, and they might have to wait 4 days for their break to wash the gear. By having a second set of gear, it eliminates risk to firefighters, as well as to the general public who may be in contact with firefighter gears. And the last transfer for $370,000 is for outside legal fees for some prolonged trials that have been occurring this year. Happy to answer any questions. Yes, Ms. Simmons?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm thrilled about the second set of turnout gear. I did a lot of research. We all know it's needed and that we've done the right procurement to get the best equipment that we can buy that will last the longest and provide the most safety to our officers. Talk to me for a minute about the lockers, because I feel like we don't really have lockers to store gear now, much less for this investment we're going to make in even better gear. Is this for every station?
Mayor, I'd like to call on our chief
And
to come
he
forward,
would come
please.
to the lectern.
Yes, thank you.
Mayor Road, members, council. Yes, sir. The lockers that we're looking at purchasing, as you know, some of our stations were built close to 50, 60, 70 years ago, don't have the lockers that are currently being put in our newer stations that will keep the gear from coming in contact with ultraviolet light, which deteriorates the gear. In our newer stations, we have lockers for the gear. Some of our older stations do not have any lockers. They hang on hooks out on the apparatus.
That's what I'm picturing. So this will put the right
This'll
kind
get
of
us
locker
started.
in every station?
This will get us started. This will not put lockers, all the lockers that we need to completely stock all the stations, but we would have to look at the stations individually because it may require some types of renovations or moving things around to get those lockers in some of the older stations.
But you'll come back to that year
Yes,
after
ma'am.
year?
Oh, yes,
to-
ma'am. We're not going to stop with this. We'd like to see those everywhere and to protect our investment in the gear itself and protect the firefighters and the public by keeping
From the
it
gear.
isolated. Yes, ma'am.
And if I may, there are some AED and CPR that will be coming up to their useful life in the next year or so. So we have another CIP project in for FY19 budget, which will include the lockers and some of the equipment that's not past its useful life
This
yet.
has nothing to do with next year's budget. This is all right.
This is right now. This is
This
like
right now.
order it tomorrow.
Thank you.
Big help, thank you.
Other questions?
Yes, so the outside legal counsel expenses are used for anything that may come up that we can't handle inside, or how is that?
Let's have the
I'm
city
gonna-
attorney for a second. This is the lawsuit, right?
Correct. Mayor, members of City Council, these expenses are largely related to the VIG litigation with regard to the port real estate and personal property taxes. You may recall when I first introduced this litigation, I explained to you that while the expenses would be less than what's being challenged in each of these cases, it is more significant than the budget I carry on my books. So we're sort of rotating that money in and out, specifically, largely for the VIG lawsuit. But I will tell you, at issue, just as a reminder, is a challenge of about $2.5 million in real estate taxes and $500,000 in personal property taxes.
Would you say that again, because I want everybody to hear that?
The funds that are being challenged is approximately $2.5 million in terms of real estate taxes and $500,000 in personal property taxes. And so you'll see, as I said before, we've had the litigation. These expenses are the vast majority through trial. We're not going to reach 1 year's worth of taxes related to this, although we may exceed the personal property tax amount that's being challenged. But I think it's a proper investment given what's at risk.
While we're on that subject, what is the status of the loan agreement? Do we know, has it been
with the state?
signed by the governor?
With the state,
Yeah.
Yes, we're just waiting for the $3.4 million to come in.
So all the documents have
Everything's been
executed.
signed, and they said they were issuing the check right before Christmas.
Checks in the mail.
The check's in the mail. So,
we've done everything.
Before Christmas, though, right?
I was supposed to get it before Christmas, and obviously we didn't receive it quite yet, but we should have it in the near future.
Other questions? Well, yes, ma'am.
Mayor, I would like for Mrs. Kelly to reiterate, particularly for our public, that the city is not receiving a check for $15 million. We've refinanced the debt, and we received word that, it was kind of out in social media, the city's got a new $15 million check that's coming in. Could you explain? No
Right.
different than me refinancing my house.
Right, it's exactly like refinancing your mortgage at home. Your payments are lower for the life of the loan, not you're going to get a $15 million refund. And so what we have here on this chart is the savings for our tax-supported debt or general obligation debt. The savings is $9 million over the life of I think it's 14 or 15 years. And so each year, the debt will be slightly lower. The debt service we have to pay will be slightly lower. And that adds up to a $9.1 million savings. And for our utilities, it's $6.5 and about $500,000 a year of savings on the bonds there. Now, utilities typically have a 30-year bonds because their life of their projects lasts longer. This is 24 years. So we did not, as part of this refinancing, we did not shorten or lengthen the life of the bond. We just took the savings over the course of the years that we had for that bond.
Thank you. So we didn't go from a 30-year mortgage to a 15-year mortgage?
No, we did not do that. We just kept
Well,
that the same. And
It's like a hard refinance.
Right. And so it was very successful, and it was a very interesting time to be in the market in December. It was the largest December ever on record for municipal bonds, and people were trying to get in the market before the tax act was passed. And we'll see what happens with the municipal bond market next year when the tax changes have come into play.
Dr. Patton, I
Yes, sir.
commend you and your finance team for being nimble and agile to take advantage of this savings. This truly is a quote-unquote, saving off our monthly mortgage payment. And we can see the benefit of the results tonight because we're able to do some much-needed things, particularly the second set of turnout gear. As we look to the future, what are the prospects for the next batch?
Well, it's going to be more challenging. Now, refinancing is now, you cannot do advanced refinancing. You have to wait to the call date. And so as we structure our debt, we're going to be looking at when we have call dates. The tax rate has decreased for many corporations, and they might not be as quick to put municipal bonds in their portfolio. So we need to start looking at that also. Our interest rates might rise. So I think while this is great news, we still need to be really monitoring the tax implications of our municipal bond. We will be having to go out to the market to get new money for CIP projects in the near future and probably next year. And so, the whole landscape has changed quite dramatically, and it yet to be seen exactly how that will work out. You read different opinions in Wall Street Journal and bond issuance and that type of thing, and so people are kind of wait and see what's going to happen. Refinancing, though, is not going to happen the way it has happened in the past.
Because of the new tax law.
Because of the new tax laws. We're only going to be able to do one refinancing for each bond, and you're going to have to wait to the call date, which is when they allow you to do it, as opposed to an advanced refinancing, which is what this was.
As the dust settles and the rules are promulgated that relate to this, would you
Give us
a briefing
Yes, sir, we will.
on what bond financing will
Sure.
look like going forward?
Yes, we will.
And as the market changes, because it will change.
Everybody satisfied? Good job.
Thank you.
But Mayor, I would also like to say, we'd like to thank you and the members of council, because when we came to you November 13th, had you not had confidence in us and the team to move forward, we would not have realized this savings. So thanks to all of you.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right, Dr. Patton, number 2. Oh, I'm sorry.
If my colleagues would agree, not tonight, but at some point in the near future, or maybe when this turnout gear comes in,
Oh, yes.
I would love for the chief to be able to give us a demonstration and an explanation of what it is and why it's important and what it does for our firefighters and what it does for our citizens. I think it's a really big deal that unless you know, you don't know.
Well, to include the science that goes into...
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yes.
And when our new truck comes, we'll have it here as we did one time
So you-
before,
you
so
got
you all
that?
can...
Everybody in
Yes, we have
You're
that.
going to ride on the tiller? You're going to drive the back?
We'll make sure you all
I'll ride with him, thank you.
bring it downtown and you all can see it. Okay.
All righty.
Ready to move forward? Mr. Baldwin will come forward and speak to us on the public hearing process.
Thank you, Dr. Patton, and good evening, Mayor Rowe, members of council, and Happy New Year. Welcome to 2018 for your planning items. We have an unusual number of public hearing items for City Council compared to your normal volume. We do have 5 public hearing items on your agenda tonight. That includes 2 of those to operate and maintain 2 new telecommunication towers. And you've noticed over the last year, we've seen a much more renewed interest in placing new towers in the city as the telecommunication industry moves forward. So it is going to be quite a challenge throughout Portsmouth to find suitable locations. So you'll see 2 of those applications tonight. Just want to point out, we went through this in some detail back when you had the application out near Cavalier Manor. The one was on Rapid, it was on Victory, but backed up to Rapid. And we went through the impact of the Telecommunications Act of 1996, federal law that provides guidance in reviewing these type of applications. I want to remind you that it's also still in effect for these applications you have in front of you tonight. Information on that was provided in your staff report packets on that, and I don't know if the city attorney wanted to mention anything else about that, but just wanted to point out that's an important aspect of your consideration tonight, the requirements of the federal act which guides telecommunication infrastructure nationally.
you gave us the opportunity. It's my understanding that the federal law is such that we cannot consider health issues as relates to the tower. Is that correct? Do I understand that correctly?
Mayor, members of City Council, as you know, historically, for quite a period of time, there was discussion about impact of waves and electronic waves that may emanate from telecommunication facilities. One of the major emphasis of the 1996 Telecommunication Act is the fact that from a locality standpoint, the federal government has preempted that area in terms of safety, in terms of anything emanating from the telecommunication equipment. So if the federal government has approved it for that particular purpose, then they have excluded that as a rationale for denying a tower. That was one of the major emphasis of that.
But we could, in our consideration, we could consider such things as compatibility.
Certainly.
And we could actually, if we found it not to be compatible, use that for the basis for denying a request.
That is still within the purview of the zoning application. Correct. You're correct.
And I would imagine that I think I'm hearing something between the lines. You caution us on how we speak about these issues?
Certainly as it relates to, as you all know, as a body, you are reviewing the application process based on a set of standards. Certainly as those issues are resolved, certainly all of these issues become public record for consideration of others, whether you approve or deny. And so certainly, as I would always say to everyone, be judicious and thoughtful in terms of your deliberations as we have a number of matters coming up. And as Mr. Baldwin has said, we tend to hold at the end of the year, and then we tend to sort of bring them all back, anything that's been backlogged. So you all have an unusual number this evening to consider. But yes, I would say that certainly be thoughtful in terms of how you address that, because all of these matters are certainly subject to some level of review should someone choose to.
And I would, a couple other items I want to mention in regard to your agenda tonight. One of those, back on the telecommunications applications, it would certainly be our recommendation that should City Council want to move in the direction of denying an application, that you carry that application to your second reading to allow a proper resolution to be drafted for your consideration at that meeting for a final disposition of the application. One of the requirements of the Telecommunications Act is that your findings, if you're denying, have to be in writing, and we found the best way to do that is to have that done through a resolution which explains your rationale for your actions. I would also point out we will have a court reporter, as we always do for these applications, at the meeting tonight, so you'll notice her sitting out there in front of you tonight, making sure we take down proper record of the meeting, which is another requirement that we comply with when we have these types of applications.
In that regard, Madam Clerk, I'm going to ask each speaker, even though they may have signed up in advance, to state both their name and mailing address for the record.
Yes.
And I'll ask each person to speak clearly and into the microphone.
I'm sure she'll appreciate that. Thank you. So that was basically what I wanted to go on. We do have, again, we have a couple of other use permit applications. I want to mention one other thing to council, whether you've noticed it or not, but the way we address applications, regardless of what the staff recommendation that started in the beginning of a process, whether it's a recommendation to approve or deny, we always put conditions as within the staff report. So in the event City Council chooses to approve, we have taken that same step we would do if we were recommending approval to recommend conditions. So you'll notice on each one of those use permit applications, as you will on all of them we do, there's always a list of proposed conditions in the event council approves. We always don't want to make any assumptions one way or the other, and I don't know if you've ever noticed that, but we do provide that in there just to make sure that was clear, that that's in your packet. Something I want to talk about is a little bit about the process we're going to use. And I think this process is in need of some refinement, what's been going on over time. As you're aware, current process We typically have a fairly lengthy staff presentation at the beginning of the public hearing process, followed by public hearing comments. And as you probably noticed on occasion, in many occasions, applicants never speak. They don't come up to the podium to answer questions. And we believe that over time, that sort of evolved, and where the staff is sort of taking an unusual role. We're both serving as the city's technical advisors on these planning items. We're also acting in some sort of a role that applicants should be playing in terms of explaining their application, what they intend to do, all those types of things. So we are moving forward with some changes the way we'd like to do these public hearing items. We started this in the December Planning Commission meeting with these 5 items. It worked very well. And again, we're trying to move this process to the point in which the planning department retains its objectivity and its position as your technical advisor, not as being perceived by anyone as some sort of a representative of the applicant or taking some sort of an advocacy role on behalf of an application. I will just make a comment. Something's been very disconcerting to us over recent time. We're getting more applicants who their representatives aren't familiar with their applications. That's become another concern of ours, where they're sending regional representatives or whatever who aren't really familiar with the details. They're basically leaving it up to the staff, the planning staff, to address questions or information about their application. We just don't think that's an appropriate role for the planning department staff in these things. So what we're going to be doing tonight is we're going to start off tonight with having a presentation by the applicant prior to the public hearing being open. The applicant will be given 10 minutes to make their presentation, again, in lieu of the staff presentation. Then after the applicant has finished their presentation, the regular public hearing process will be open. They'll follow through regular public hearing process. And as always, the planning staff will be there if there's any questions or any technical questions you want to ask of us. We'll certainly continue to provide that, perform that role for City Council. So bottom line, the goal is we want to ensure the applicants show up. The applicants are prepared to address council, answer your questions. They don't leave it to us to answer questions and that type of thing. And then finally, we're very concerned with trying to make sure our technical advisory role is preserved for what it's intended to be, and that we don't slide over and end up having to answer questions on behalf of an applicant who has chosen either to defer to us or to not show up or to send someone who's perhaps not as familiar with the application as it might be. So that's the proposed change tonight. We think this is a positive change. Again, by having the applicants start this through the Planning Commission process, they get a chance to put their presentations together. We will have slides available, just like we always do, if anyone wants to refer back to any type of the information. You have that included in your application packet, but we will also have that available as well.
Questions on the process? Yes, sir.
Yes, is this change at the request of the administration, or why is this?
Well, this is a change, I would just say, sort of in a global sense. We've been discussing the problems we've been having process-wise for some period of time. I think we've sort of hit a point now where again, I mentioned we've had a couple of applications where the applicants were coming up to me before the meeting and saying, I don't know anything about this application. I hope they don't call me up. And we just don't think that's an appropriate. So we think we need to go back to a process. This is the way the city has historically done it. Other cities historically have done it where the applicants speak for their own application. We don't make their presentation for them. So it's just becoming.
How many times has that occurred?
It's happened. What happens regularly, either they don't show up or they've come over and told me, and I can tell you 2 in the last probably 3 or 4 meetings where I've had applicants come over to me and say, I'm only here because the applicant didn't want to come. And we've had one come and say, I don't really know exactly where we are in the process. I hope that's not going to be an issue. So it's more common than you'd think. We cover a lot of it up because we're presenting all this material in our presentations.
Well, my concern is out of uniformity. If the applicants are going to be presenting before we hear from your staff, then we may be hearing different presentations for different applicants. I don't understand why it wouldn't be where we know that there's been some vetting of the process before it comes to council than just an initial presentation from an applicant. And I'm just concerned from that standpoint that there's no vetting or going over. It's just a raw presentation to council with planning there to answer questions.
All right, well, let me attempt to address your question this way. We do work with the applicants very closely in a process. And of course, they go through the Planning Commission, where will be the first place where they will make their presentation. So there's clearly going to be a process at the Planning Commission meeting where their presentations are going to be viewed by everyone in the room, including the public. And then we continue to discuss with the applicant what they might need to do before they get in front of City Council to make sure they have a clear presentation.
It just seems it's more efficient when you're presenting it because you know what it is that council needs to hear versus an applicant who may not have ever presented, may not be as prepared. And I think something at this level we should hear from staff first, and the issues that you raise and your staff are usually pertinent to getting an understanding of the application, and I'm not sure if that's going to be consistent.
Well, let's see where we are. Amongst council, the way I understand it, this is a change that most local governments do. You don't come across as the advocate. They should know their own application. So let's find out where we are. How many people are for this change?
Oh, yes, they should advocate their own
Okay.
project.
Yeah, they should have enough willingness and knowledge of their own needs to present it to us.
Okay.
I don't understand why they wouldn't.
Yeah, I think so too, but I think that staff is still going to give an overview of it before we,
No.
just not at all.
That's not our project.
Well, because I guess I come to Planning Commission, so I hear, as
Right.
liaison there, I do hear it from your perspective
Right.
there, and then,
And our hope, and this is an item for getting some additional discussion, we're trying to make sure our staff reports are very clear so that anything I would say publicly is already in your possession well before the meeting, so you'll have seen that.
yeah.
Well, we shouldn't be in the position of selling the applicant's project, whatever it may be, to ourselves. They should do the selling. We should follow up, as Bob said, and just give an overview at that point of what its impact is to the citizens or the city.
Okay.
We're not the applicant's selling organization.
All right, I agree.
And you're always there.
We'll be there, we'll be always there. And we want to make sure that if you have questions, there's enough staff there.
Yeah.
Tonight, everyone who's worked on every item you have on your agenda will be in the room.
Right.
So all the staff will be there, including myself. So there'll be plenty of resources available if you have any questions or if there's any concerns about that.
The majority like the change. Madam Clerk, I'm going to ask you to be the timekeeper. So when we call the applicant forward, you can start the clock.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, you want me to continue? Mayor, we have 4 items on the city manager's report tonight. I shall review those. The first is an adoption of an ordinance accepting a kids' meal program grant in the amount of $628,207.20 from the U.S. Department of Agriculture Child and Adult Care Food Program, administered through the Virginia Department of Health, and appropriating said funds in the FY 2018 Grants Fund for use by the Department of Parks, Recreation, and Leisure Services to provide meals and snacks authorized under the Kids Meal Program. This program provides, it's estimated to provide about 346 snacks a day and 1,100 dinners daily. And these meal programs are provided through 4 recreation centers, 1 day treatment facility, 3 private community organizations, 3 middle schools, and 2 high schools, and at 8 elementary schools, which house the 6 to 6 sites during the school year when children are out of school and therefore may not otherwise receive proper nutritional meals. The second item is an adoption of an ordinance authorizing the transfer of the $1.4 million from the FY 2016 Debt Service Fund to the FY 2018 General Fund, including $1.1 million to the Department of Fire Rescue and Emergency Services non-capital equipment account line of the FY 18 General Fund budget, and $370,000 to the city attorney legal contractual services line item of the FY 2018 general fund budget, and we just discussed this particular item. Did I miss one? I did miss one. The next is an adoption of an ordinance accepting with appreciation a donation of $100 from the Tidewater Baptist Women Missionary and Educational Convention and appropriating said funds in the FY 2018 Grants Fund for use by the Department of Social Services to support operations of the Social Services Intake Unit. The Tidewater Baptist Women Missionary and Educational Convention, Incorporated, has provided DSS with a check in the amount of $100 with the request that the funds be utilized for the purpose of supporting the elderly during the holidays. And the last item is an adoption of a motion amending the 2018 calendar of city council meetings. And the background is there was a request by city council member that Holy Week, March 25th to 31, 2018, be observed with the cancellation of the regular city council on Tuesday, March 27th. The action was allowed, the discussion is this action would allow the city council to give advance notice to the citizens, media, and city departments of the amended 2018 meeting schedule. There is no financial impact. I'll yield to you, Mayor.
Okay. At our last meeting in December, we adopted the calendar for 2018. Dr. Whitaker had pointed out to us that the week of March 25th through April 1 is Holy Week, and the implication was we need to consider what we can not to meet that week. We had, under the calendar that was adopted, it's my understanding from what you just said, we have a meeting that was to take place on March 27th. And so what you have passed out is a calendar that eliminates that meeting and still has, though, the budget presentation taking place on Monday, but starting at 4 o'clock as opposed, I think I remember 5.
That's right.
How do you all feel about that?
That's the manager's presentation?
Yes.
That when you
Yes, that's the 26th.
We're here for 30 minutes.
Yeah, well, hopefully it's more than 30. Yeah.
And that's a
30, yeah,
work day
sure.
anyway.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Dr. Whitaker?
No, so the initial request was that we not meet that week.
That's right, but we had already scheduled the budget.
Right.
That was the initial request. But I see the budget presentation is still that week.
With our calendar, Dr. Whitaker and members of council that we adopted and worked on through the entire budget process to include the process and timelines for the schools. It is absolute that I present it on the 26th to keep in line with all of the other targeted dates that we have to meet.
The calendar that we adopted back in December, though, had that meeting starting at 5 or 6?
At 6.
So this moves it up 2 hours and
Yeah,
moves
that's
it
right.
during what
Business
is
hours.
A work day anyway.
Right.
Well, that's a good compromise.
Right.
What do you all think?
Fine?
That's fine.
So we need a motion to adopt this calendar
Yeah, amended.
as amended.
Yes.
A motion to adopt?
Well, we need to do it out there.
Yeah, I agree.
Any other things on this?
No, Mayor and members of council, that concludes the 4 items in the city manager's report. I did put before you an update or report back. I think it's really an update on the Winter Storm Grayson, which details and gives background on where we are, what
We
we've
have a
accomplished.
resolution on that we need to
It's
consider?
a part of your agenda, yes,
Yes,
sir.
that's
It's
what
an
I
item
thought.
submitted by council members.
Okay. Right. Any questions about Grayson? Yes, ma'am.
I would love for the manager to make this presentation in that meeting about Grayson. We've had so many questions. I think it would be important to for the public to hear this. And my other comment is, I noticed my colleague and one of my council colleagues in Norfolk had a link on her Facebook page to the Norfolk website, which listed very clearly what the snowplow routes were. What are the major roads?
They're on ours,
And it
too.
said, this is Route 1, this is Route 2, and I think that would be very helpful. It can't be hard. We know what they are.
We have that on our website.
Is it on there?
Yes.
Well, okay.
Okay.
Good job.
All right, it's been there. Right.
I couldn't find it.
Okay,
but
we'll make sure you
I'll put on my glasses next time.
Right. The second item, there was a request for consideration of having gyms available, be city and schools for all football leagues. And that was brought forward by the president of the Portsmouth Cowboys League, of which Parks and Recreation has met several times with Mr. Barnes. Mr. Barnes has indicated that he would provide the information which must be provided in order as an organization. And in them following back up with him today, Mr. Vaughn said that he would get the information to Parks and Recreation before close of meeting today, but they have met with him weeks ago. In addition, all of our programs that are recreation operated in recreation centers for recreational basketball programs, those centers are used through the course of the leagues. But once Mr. Barnes gets his information in and his desire to become a part of the basketball program for recreation, then Parks and Recreation will look and work with the schools for additional gym space for programs.
Okay. To address the report on Grace and, yes, sir. How about if we do that at 18-19 as part of the consideration of the emergency resolution?
Okay, that would be good.
All right. Dr. Whitaker.
Dr. Patton, I have a question regarding the report back on the gymnasium. You note here that the request to use the recreational facilities for the internal youth basketball league would require having to investigate using the school gyms.
No, all of our recreation centers are already used for internal basketball programs. And if Mr. Barnes comes into the program, which would add additional teams, then Parks and Recreation would work with the schools to see if we can use some of their gyms.
So the schools are already being used.
I'm sure some of the schools are.
Right. So I guess my question, I'm not clear when you say that you would have to investigate using school facilities that could incur additional costs.
Right. If we need additional school facilities,
Right.
let's say we need 3 more gyms, then we would have to get with the schools to see exactly what that would entail.
Right, but Churchland Basketball League, is that part of the city of Portsmouth?
Yes.
Okay. And then, well, I guess, is it still called Minor Basketball League?
They're part of city,
And
the
they play
recreation
at
program.
Wilson High School. Well, those recreational programs are already under used.
Are underused or
Right.
in use?
Underused as far as actual participants in those programs.
I can't answer
Well,
that. I would
I'm
have
just-
to. I would have to get more information. I cannot say that they are.
So you don't have any knowledge of the fact that Mr. Barnes' program has already been participating with the Wilson League?
I'm not aware of that, Dr. Wood.
Yeah,
Dr.
you might want to check that out, because if that's the case, then there is no issue of additional fees, because they're already playing there.
I will investigate and get back with you.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
And I'll do that in a report back tomorrow.
Okay, and also, just for clarity purposes, Churchland Basketball League and Minor Basketball Leagues are independent organizations. Is that correct?
They are independent. They are
Right.
not the recreational
So
in
that's-
neighborhood facility.
So it's not like a citizen would come to Parks and Recs to sign up for those basketball leagues. They sign up actually
leagues.
within those. And so those leagues are actually just under Parks and Recs.
Yes.
As independent organizations.
Right. I would
Which
say
is
so.
what Mr. Barnes, through the Portsmouth Cowboys, is an independent organization seeking to be a part of Portsmouth Parks and Rec.
Right.
Okay.
So what we're asking him, which he has spoken, met with, Mr. Pace was in a meeting with her recently, is to provide your information on your league as is required. And he indicated he would get that in today.
I assume, is there some benefit to the city as far as, it's almost like we're outsourcing the sign-up registration
Right.
of the two to
Right.
these
They don't
independent
have to
leagues?
come
And they don't- okay.
through Parks and Recreation.
Okay,
Right.
all right.
But there is a, there is an attempt to make the fees that are charged across to the citizens, the youth that are in, kind of in unison, that I'm not charging $500 and you're charging $32. So there is some discussion going on with that.
It's from what I've seen, that league charges more.
I don't know, I know
Yeah,
that.
and
They're different fees.
Yeah.
Right.
And they have more participation.
Right. So I'll get your report back tomorrow.
I saw, yes, sir, you've got the floor.
Yeah, Mayor, thanks, and members of the council. Bring your attention to a couple weeks ago, we approved a $500 supplement to our retirees with 20 years or more service. Unfortunately, we overlooked a couple of groups in doing that, certainly not intentionally. One group was the widows and the widowers. I'm told some of the people in those groups sometimes have to choose between food or medicine. And also another group were those with credible service, which I don't think any of us were aware of that term. But that term is people that used their sick leave to reach that 20-year or more total. So what I'm asking for tonight is a consensus to correct that oversight and go ahead and include them in that $500 supplement, if there's a consensus to do so.
Well, let's find out.
Yes, I mean, if that's what was done before, and that was my understanding that the widows would be considered in that group as well.
And the
as
credible.
And the credibles.
Yes,
Whoever had 20 years,
yes.
however you
Yeah.
count it.
Right.
And just
Exactly.
fix the problem. I don't think,
Right.
that was not the intent of my motion, to exclude anybody.
What was done in the past?
Mayor?
We included
Speak,
those
Mayor.
people.
Mayor, speak.
Let's find out where we are.
Okay.
I'm yay.
I know, yay.
Yes.
Yay.
Yay. And
Well, I asked a question, what was done in the
Okay.
past? That's-
Mayor and members of council, the request that was made to city manager and management was for us to provide the 20 years for retirees. As I explained and talked to Mr. Moody, and we brought to you what you asked. As I explained to Mr. Moody, us going forward and providing for John Hancock the resolution of which you asked us to prepare, they moved forward in providing that funding for the retirees with 20 years or more. There are 4 or 5 different groups that are not retirees, but are subgroups under the retirement fund. And so with that said, we move forward with what you asked us to do. The subgroups, and if I could ask just Mrs. Gooden quickly to name those 3 or 4 subgroups that we did not address, and it was never in a discussion. But I just want you to know, we moved with what you asked us. Miss, could you just name what those?
I don't think that's the debate.
Okay, all right.
What I hear you ask is that we include those subgroups.
We didn't know that.
Yeah.
That was not our
Exactly.
intent.
Exactly.
And I think we have a
Excuse me.
Consensus.
My question wasn't answered. The question is,
Okay.
what was done in the past?
Not this time, but in the past.
I can't answer that right off the top of my head.
It was everybody.
The time before, which was in March of 2017, Mrs. Kelly said was all of the groups. That was not what was us. We understand.
Is that your answer?
Yeah.
Okay.
Case closed.
Same question. Do we know the financial
It's going to be
impact?
probably, what would you say, about 500 something?
It'll be about $250,000 more. It might be even more than that.
Yes,
$500.
I think it's going to be about close to $300,000 more.
To include all of the groups?
Yes.
Okay.
Because there are 607
I mean, 'cause the whole- I'm sorry.
677 people. Do you have the email, Ms. Gooden?
Yes, with the numbers?
Yes, I have the numbers. I can give it to you right now. Go on, just go up to the, you don't want that?
No, go ahead.
Okay.
You want it?
Yeah. Wait, there was some question.
He asked, yeah.
How much?
Good evening, Mayor and Vice Mayor. I don't have the financial, I can give you the numbers. There are actually 27 that they consider alternate payees. First one, this is going to be under fire police. There's 27 alternate payees. There are 80 spousal beneficiaries, and there are 105 retirees with less than 20 years of service. Under PSRS, there are 67 spousal beneficiaries, and there are 48 retirees with less than 20 years of service.
Now, that last is credible. In other words, they reached the 20 years or more with the sick leave.
We would have to double check that for you. I think however they got to their 20 years, they should have gotten that with the initial 500.
Okay.
Still good?
Still good.
Yeah, still good? Still good?
Yeah.
Let's put this to bed.
I'm good too. So,
I'm finished with my presentation.
so if you need an appropriation for
We
this,
will do that. We'll follow proper process.
we were closed yesterday. Was there anything on the work session yesterday evening that, or the calendar was?
That we're bringing all of that back on the 22nd and 23rd.
Is there a need for a closed session?
No.
Okay.
Liaison reports.
Liaison reports, thank you.
Personnel committee did not meet, so I have no report.
I haven't met with anyone.
I have reports.
Okay.
For the EDA and the PPIC, a joint meeting was held by those two commissions December 19th, which was a wonderful meeting, well received by all the commissioners. It really was a great meeting. There was a lot of conversation, a lot of camaraderie, a lot of commissioners getting to know each other. It was so well received that the commissions agreed that not only should they do this in December every year, because the calendar always will mess up, Christmas will mess up one of their meetings, but maybe do it 2 or 3 times a year. It really was a great meeting. The Portsmouth Military Affairs Commission did not meet in December. However, I want the council and the public to be aware that the city of Portsmouth is going to be hosting delegates from the Russian ambassador to the United States and members of the Royal Russian Navy here in Portsmouth at the Naval Medical Center Historic Graveyard, where you'll recall last year in January we had a group of Russian naval officers who came, and some folks from the ambassador's Russian ambassador to there are 6 Russian naval officers buried in the historic graveyard at Naval Medical Center Portsmouth. They were naval officers who were here in 1887 and died of one of the typhoid or one of the terrible diseases that went around, and they've always been unnamed graves. They determined who 3 of them were, and last year there was a ceremony with the high priest from the Russian Orthodox Church in Washington. It was carried by all the national news organizations. Well, now they've determined who the other 3 naval officers are. And this is a ceremony, and this service is a result, I think this is fascinating, of the U.S.-Russia Joint Commission on POWs and MIAs, which was created in 1992 by former President George H.W. Bush and former Russian President Boris Yeltsin. And so it's in the works again for this to happen again, and they'll be back in February or March, and hopefully when it won't be as cold as it was last January when you and I stood there and froze to death. So I just think that's something to look forward to. On a completely different note, earlier this week I sent my council colleagues a request for consensus on a resolution to be adopted in March celebrating women in public office. Most of you know I've been affiliated with the National Federation of Women Legislators, which is a national nonpartisan organization of women in elected office below the federal level, and mostly state and local elected women. And I would ask for your consensus to have this resolution adopted at our March 19th agenda, as I sent to you earlier. And I hope that this year Councilwoman Lucas Burke will join me at the next annual conference in Washington.
I would be honored.
Any
Yes.
dissension?
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I didn't know it was my turn yet. Yes. The Hampton Roads Regional Jail Authority, we met on December the 20th, and one of the major concerns they had was with staffing concerns. They're supposed to have 10 new correctional officers starting the academy yesterday. That still leaves 16 positions open. They said some of the pods, and max security pod was designed for 102, but sometimes there's up to 110 to 120 inmates, and there's safety concerns. Another thing, there was issue was transports. They've had 355 transports in reference to medical, so that takes at least 2 correctional officers out of the facility to go to the hospital with these individuals. There has been 320 that have had to be taken to the ER. 100 of them were taken by the fire department through the EMS and ambulance. 99 of those were admitted to the hospital. Pharmacy costs, they were spending approximately $127,000 a month for HIV medication. They had one cancer patient that was costing the medication was $20,000 a month. They're expecting a 7 to 12% increase on the medical cost. They expected by the end of the budget year to be $3.9 million over budget for their medical. And another issue in reference, it said $3.9 million over their medical budget because the cost is
Do
increasing.
we share that based on where the inmate comes from, or just across the board?
It's across the board. So,
It's equally high.
and another thing with the staffing issue, there is Delegate Matthew James, as the patron, has put in a budget amendment. There was a letter drafted that was signed by the mayors of each of the city which participate, which include Hampton, Newport News, Norfolk, Chesapeake, and Portsmouth. And the budget amendment's a little excess of $2.4 million based on a staffing study to get more correctional officers in the facility to make it a safer environment for them as well as the inmates. That ends my report.
Any questions? Dr. Wood? All right. Well, this concludes our work session, and we'll convene at 7.